Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak in the FDS experience sharing session. It is indeed a privilege to be here today. I'm an associate professor in the School of Health Sciences, Caritas Institute of Higher Education. My research interests are focused on the mechanism of feeding, nausea, and emesis. Today, I hope to share with you some tips and some of my experience in preparing a research proposal. Research begins with curiosity. There are several steps in the information-seeking process. So it follows aims, find the objectives, and then to decide the research methods, budget, and ethical consideration. In the initial planning stage, I like to use a mind map to help me to visualize all the relevant information in a logical way. Before start writing, it is important to organize the materials you are going to write in the proposal and to convey them to the reviewers clearly. So summarize what is known and what is unknown, including some preliminary findings would definitely enhance or strengthen the proposal. So state the hypothesis and the rationale behind it. State the objectives and the research methods. So what specific activities will you perform? State the expected outcome and the impact. Here are some general tips in writing a proposal. First, read the instructions for the FDS application form carefully and align the application with the assessment criteria. Try to grab the reviewer's interest from the start, so the title and the abstract are very important. Write clearly and concisely, so that to make sure the writing is easy to read and easy to understand, and is short but comprehensive, so that the research plan can be conveyed to the reviewers clearly. The research questions must be focused, new, and unique, and also need to provide sufficient detail about the methods and analysis and how you will interpret the data. It is also important to describe the expertise, both for yourself, the PI, and also the co-investigator. In the following section, let me share with you how did I prepare my proposal. Title. This is the first impression on the reviewers. The title of my project is Elucidating the Novel Role of Hypothalamic GLP-1 Receptor System in Mechanism of Nausea and Emesis in Sancus murinus. So the research question here is the novel role of hypothalamic GLP-1 receptor system. And then we focus on elucidating, making clear its role in mechanism of nausea and emesis. There is evidence that the use of GLP-1 based therapy induces nausea and emesis, but the mechanism is less well understood. So here comes the knowledge gap. Because research strategies elucidating emesis and antiemetic drugs have focused on brainstem vomiting center. So the mechanism is less well understood because the potential involvement of the hypothalamus has been overlooked. So based on the existing knowledge, we performed some preliminary studies. But let's skip to the last few lines. So our findings suggest that the hypothalamic GLP-1 receptors may be at least partially involved in mechanism of nausea and emesis. So that the aim of our project is to determine the role of this receptor system in feeding and emesis. And then we focus on understanding the underlying mechanism of the signaling pathway. So based on the existing knowledge and our preliminary findings, we hypothesize that the GLP-1 receptor activation in the hypothalamus may modulate local release of neurotransmitter, which act as key modulators in these brain areas and are involved in mechanism of emesis control as well as nausea. So in this hypothesis, actually it contains three parts. The first part is receptor activation, and then the second is modulate local release of neurotransmitter, and then the last part is whether these are the key modulator in mechanism of nausea and emesis. So I set up three objectives to test this hypothesis. The first one is to investigate the signaling pathway. The signaling pathway of GLP-1 receptor activation. The second objective is to investigate the change in the local release of neurotransmitter. And the third objective is to investigate whether the receptor for this neurotransmitter are involved in nausea and emesis. So that we have three objectives to answer different parts. And then when we put together, there will be a more impactful conclusion. So impact. The definition of impact has been described clearly in the application guideline of the FDS application form. So in brief, impact is the demonstrable benefits or contributions beyond academia. The impact of my project is to the discovery of new drug target for antiemetic development. So the new knowledge generated may then improve the quality of life of cancer patients receiving chemotherapy. This is all I want to share today. There are some final remarks on grant writing. So good planning, good organization, good writing, write clearly and concisely, and start writing early because grant writing is really take a long time. It's a really not easy job to do. Okay. I would like to thank my co-investigator, Professor John Rudd and Professor Dr Chan from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and also the research office of the Caritas Institute of Higher Education, and last but not least, the FDS review panel. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. We will now have a short Q&A section on the presentation by Dr. Chan. If you have any question, please raise hand to let us know. Please also introduce yourself before asking questions.
So thanks very much for the excellent example. And I came from our PolyU CPCE. And actually in your research, you specify a lot of terminology, which is your specialism. And that is so crucial to the project and proposal. However, in the judging panel, I would like to know how much literature review or to what extent I should explicates the specialism idea or knowledge so that the review panel may understand their objective and their target outcomes and all this, because very often we have the target audience, but the target audience may be across disciplines in the review panel as well. And sometimes we also collaborate with colleagues across specialism. How do we have smart division of labor so that we can use our expertise to contribute to the research grants proposal? That's my key questions in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. So how to make sure the knowledge is enough? Okay. So on the application form, there are limited number of pages, but then we need to within that number of pages to give all the relevant and important information. So actually, when I prepare my proposal, in the preparation stage, when I made the mind map, I read all relevant information, all the publication related to that research topic, and then I would select those as most important, and then for some complicated research idea, then I may use some figures or charts to explain that. Yeah, and for the division of labor, usually me, like as the PI of the project, I write the whole proposal myself. But then the co-investigator, their contribution is that they have some expertise that is not in my particular field. But then if they become the co-investigator of my project, then they can bring in new, for example, new technology that we could further move our project forward and doing something new and novel. Thank you.